Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining in for this call. I'll start with a small introduction about ERA, and I'll introduce the speaker, and then we will move on. And I'll hand it over to Adolika to share with us her to share with us about their project on the revival of the sub-Himalayan grasslands by managing invasive plants in Manas World Heritage Site. So a little bit about ERA. I kind of do this, before every talk, just to set a little bit of context about why we are doing this and what we are hoping to achieve through these conversations and why we are hosting such specific talks. So the Ecological Restoration Alliance, ERA India for short, is an open alliance where we're trying to create a space where we can access all kinds of resources related to restoration. Not just that, we want to make it an inclusive space where we can help foster connections between people who are practicing restoration or between people who between knowledge partners and people who need specific insights. And essentially, the idea is to kind of create a learning space where anyone, anywhere can come up and start restoring their native landscapes. That's the broader goal about ERA. And when we talk about why we have this series of webinar, one thing is to kind of give notice to the projects that are happening across India in the restoration space, as well as allied topics, right? And the other is to so one is that, and the other is to bring a lot of awareness towards the kind of restoration that is possible, where native biodiversity, the recovery of native biodiversity is key. So that's broadly why we're doing these webinars. And if you feel at any point that there are some people whose voices should be heard, or there are projects that we might not know of, please reach out to us and to share these projects with us so we can also bring them into focus. So that's about it from ERA. I'll just talk briefly. I mean, I don't want to get into a large introduction. I would let Alolika introduce her project and the team better. But to start with, I would want to first give out a few, housekeeping rules. One is, please, as you have questions, please put them on the chat, and we will take them up towards the end, as we usually do. Two, if you have signed in, please put your name as whatever, please change your profile name to whatever your name is so that we may be able to, if in case you have questions, we can actually call you out and, have you ask the speaker directly. So it'll just make it easier. So please do change your name to whatever, instead of having numbers or phone names. That would be really beneficial. And the last is during this whole webinar, let's keep ourselves on mute and let's hear from the speaker primarily, right? And then towards the end, we can always open up and take these questions and so on. So I'll just talk a little bit and I'll hand it over to Alolika. So Alolika is a conservation biologist with Aranyak. She works as a manager with them. And we were, in our initial conversation, we were talking about, the kind of projects that they're doing. And that's how we started. That's why, as our conversation went on, we learned that, Aranyak is doing some incredible work in terms of restoring. We took a 2 square kilometer patch to restore or revive the grassland, actually, by removing invasive alien species and working alongside communities, government, and forest departments. So I think it was a very interesting approach, and I think I will now just hand it over to Alolika to go further in detail about and introduce their work and about herself, and share her experience with all of us. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining in, and it's so nice to have you all to taking this time out. And Alolika, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you so much for taking the time out to present to us.
Thank you, Arjun. Thank you for that introduction, and I thank ERA for providing me this platform and opportunity to share about our work on how we are and what we are doing actually to revive one of these vital ecosystems in Assam. So I think without further delay, I will straight away share my screen. I'm good to go, right, Arjun?
Yes, please. It's all to you,
Yeah.
handed over to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just confirm whether you can see my screen. Is it in the slide mode?
We can see, yeah, it's in slide mode now. Thank you.
Slide mode, right? Okay. Yeah. With Zoom, it's always very confusing because you don't see yourself in the screen. Okay. To start with, a very good afternoon to all of us present here today, and thank you for taking your time out and giving an opportunity to share the kind of work that we are doing here in Manas. We started with Manas, now we are scaling up the work in other protected areas as well. So, and here we go. I will be talking about how we are reviving the sub-Himalayan grasslands by actually managing one of the emerging and very pressing issue of invasive alien plants. And from these three pictures that I have put up in the first slide, this is the pristine grasslands that we still have in Manas. We have a lot of threatened species that are actually dependent on this grassland, which I will be talking about more in my presentation. And here we go. I'm trying to change my slides. Is it working there? I don't see my slides being changed.
Not working out here.
Okay, I think I'll share it again and Is it changing now?
No, it's not changing. Should I try presenting?
Yeah, I did share a presentation with you. Can you share it? It's not changing from my side. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just open it up.
Sorry about the glitch.
No, that's okay. I think it tends to happen. Okay, I'll just share from my end. Give me a second.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, I can see. Yeah. Okay. So this is the yeah. We're good to go. No, you can skip to the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah. So to start with, what are the sub-Himalayan grasslands? The sub-Himalayan grassland occurs in the region. You can see in the map above there is a narrow strip of green strip. So that is the Tarai region, where actually the Himalayan fields actually converts to the plain areas, and it's a tall grassland ecosystem. It's very species specific. It is mostly dominated by species like the Narega, Phragmites, and Erianthus with sacrum, different sacrum species, and the Imperata. And this is one of the tallest grasslands that you find worldwide. It is one of the, again, very productive grasslands. In India, it extends from the northern part of India, parts of Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, and all the way to the eastern part of India in Assam and Arunachal. And these are this supports high biomass and is home to many threatened grassland obligate species. The next slide, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is a bit of animation, so you can tab off one by one. Yeah, no,
I think sorry.
Yeah, like there are many text here, so I thought that it would be confusing to have all in one go. The previous slide, please.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just no. I kind of tapped all of them. Not sorry.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So talking about this again, sub-Himalayan grassland ecosystems, these are very vital ecosystems, and it has got immense ecological, economic, and cultural values, not only at a local scale but also at the global scale. At local scale, these grasslands provide excellent habitat to many threatened species, and also ensures availability of water flow, provides a lot of ecosystem service to local communities, while at the global scale, it actually helps in mitigating the impact of the climate change by carbon sequestration and others. I already mentioned it's very productive, and since it is productive, it's also vulnerable to agricultural encroachment. Most of these grasslands are now confined to the protected areas. We don't have much of these grasslands left in the region where it's not protected. Most of this has been lost to sugarcane cultivation, mostly in the northern part of India. And yeah, the next click, please, Arjun. And in Manas National Park, which is in the western part of Assam in India, there is a vital, it actually harbors a vital ecosystem, the Sub-Himalayan grasslands, which supports many threatened species like the pygmy hawk, hispid deer, hog deer, the Bengal african. The next click, please. Yeah, so here is a picture where you can see a snapshot of a grassland species, and if you can zoom in further, there is a hog deer peeping out of the grassland. And the map below, this is the land use land cover map of Manas National Park. The lighter green portion are the grasslands and the darker green are the woodlands. I will be talking about this map in my later slides in more details. The next, please. So we actually undertook our habitat conservation work in grasslands of Manas. And why we chose in the grasslands of Manas. So Manas is a very high value conservation landscape that has a wide diversity of grass species. Around 43 species are known to occur there. In grasses do occur in different assemblages, right? So there are 7 major grass associations, and there are around 43 to 45 species of grasses that are known to occur. Of the total 500 square kilometer of grasslands in Manas, around 40% is currently occupied by grasslands, and there are as many as 21 threatened species. Many of them are grassland obligates. But having said this, but the grasslands are again, degraded, mostly due to anthropogenic activities and also invasion by the different alien invasive plants. And I need to mention here that despite Manas being one of the high conservation value landscape, it has got its own long history of disturbances. Recognizing the importance of Manas back in the 1970s, it was declared as one of the first 9 tiger reserves of the country. But in the late 90s to early 2000, almost for a period of around 15 years, there were incidences of armed conflict, and that actually, kind of led to a complete collapse of the conservation actions, the management interventions, which led to a decline of the wildlife population and habitat. And the most affected habitat or the species were the ones that were grassland dependent. We lost our 100 rhino population from Manas. The population of swamp deer and hog deer crashed to a very low number. So it was the grasslands and its dependent species which were the most affected. The next slide, please. Yeah, okay. So there are again 5 pictures in here, which I will be, you can click one by one, but I will let you know when to do, Arjun. Yeah, and okay, talking about Manas. So in 2003, when the, a peace treaty was signed between the Borough Autonomous Council. The Borough Autonomous Council was formed, and again the conservation action, kind of revived. But that was, mostly targeted towards securing the population of charismatic animals, and not much attention was paid to the habitat. So we kind of stepped in to understand what is going on with the habitat of Manas. What if the habitat is not restored or secured? What will happen to this species? So in an attempt to understand the current status and the current condition of the grassland, we did carry out a time series analysis. We analyzed the land use land cover maps for the last 31 years. So here you see a land use land cover map of Manas National Park, developed from a satellite imagery of 1995, where you can see that the darker green portions are actually the woodland, whereas the lighter green portion, there are 2 lighter shades of green. Those are the grassland, mostly the alluvial grassland, the grasslands that are tall and need moist soil to grow, and they're more of an upland, drier grasslands of Imparata and Anaranga. So you can see in 1995, almost 60% of the entire park is occupied by the grassland habitats. The next click, please. In 2003, you can see, the grassland slowly started decreasing. And also you can see two major, you see the southwestern part and in the northeastern part, there are two yellow portions. Those are the encroachment, the human encroachment, because there were insurgency going on. Not the management didn't have much control over the park, so a lot of encroachment were also happening at the same time. So we lost a major chunk of habitat with this encroachment. The next clip, please. In 2011, that trend continued. The grassland started decreasing while there are a lot of encroachment happening, mostly in the eastern part of the park. The next one, please. And 2019, it kind of hit an all-time low. The grasslands were almost, we have lost 50% of the grasslands that we had in 1995. The next one, please. Yeah. So here I put two pictures for comparison, where you can see that in the last 31 years, from 1988 to 2019, we have lost, major chunk of the grassland habitat. In 1988, where there were more than 60% of entire Manas was covered by grasslands, by the alluvial and the upland grasslands. But in 2019, we have left with almost 30%, 40% of grassland, which is roughly around 190 or 200 square kilometer of the habitat now. And the next one, please. Yeah. So there was already this inherent problem of natural succession taking over, and that has been, fueled by anthropogenic activities as well. So we have, in the last 31 years, we have already lost 50% of the grasslands. And of the existing grasslands that we had in Manas, those are also, threatened by species like the invasive alien species. This issue was time and again reported by different conservation organizations, by the UNESCO World Heritage Site, but not much attention was paid, or not much conservation, actions were oriented towards securing this habitat. The next clip, please. Taking cognizance of the situation, we actually started a study back in 2013. We did not have much of the empirical information of what kind of invasive species are there in Manas, or what is the extent of invasion, how the animals are being affected by this invasion. So we started from a scratch. We initially conducted surveys for 2 years to understand what is the distribution of this species, what are the species, where are these species, how they are affecting the different animals or the native vegetation. So we began our study in 2030, and for the next 2.5 years, we conducted these surveys. And we also conducted, at the same time, we conducted experiments to actually come up with pragmatic solutions to control this invasive species. The next one, please. And on completion of our survey, we found that the grasslands are mostly invaded by the Chromolaena odorata and Mikania micrantha. Both this, one is a climber, the Mikania is a climber, and the Chromolaena is a shrub. And both these are native to the Southern American countries, which were at one point of time introduced to India for different reasons, and that escaped the laboratory or the point of introduction and spread out to our native vegetation. And these species are not only a threat to the native wildlife or biodiversity, it also causes a lot of economic losses, because they are a problem in the agricultural fields as well. The next one, please. Yeah. So conducting these surveys, first we found that there are two most abundant species. One is the Chromolaena and another is the Mikania. And of the existing grassland, which is around 190 square kilometer of the total 500 square kilometer of Manas, almost 30% of this habitat is currently invaded. The next one, please. So this is the map where you can see, this is a location map as well as a distribution of invasive, where you can see where Manas National Park is located. It's in Assam, in the western part of Assam. And if you go into further details, you can see all those green patches are the grassland patches embedded in the woodlands. And the yellow and the purple portions are actually the invasive plants. The yellow is the Chromolaena, whereas the purple indicates the Mikania. We carried our survey more intensively in the central and the eastern part of the park. The western part, during our survey still had some problems of insurgency, so we were not able to carry out a very intensive survey. Most of our work, comes from the central and the eastern part. And as you can see, it's a southern part of the park which is mostly affected by invasion. This is also the area of a lot of anthropogenic activities like cattle grazing and other activities like fishing and those kind of activities happen. So it's the southern part of the park that is mostly affected by invasion. The next one, please. And we also find that habitat openness, and by habitat openness I mean like any opening in a continuous patch of grassland. It can be road, it can be construction of anti-poaching camps, it can be trails that has been created. So that kind of openness kind of encourages the spread and the spread of the invasive plants. The next one, please. So here is just a photographic evidences of the invasion. I'll come to this later as well. We can go to the next slide. Yeah. Having this field information of what are the species, what is the extent of their invasion, we kind of use this field data, and using the species distribution modeling technique, we produce some risk maps to understand. Can we have the maps with the click, Arjun? Yeah, so we actually model this field data into this algorithm called micrantha and forest random forest modeling. I haven't gone into details here, but if you would, people interested can write to me. I will be happy to answer about it. So we kind of feed in this field data and came up with this maps where you can see the entire grassland chunks. The yellow portion are the grasslands, and the red color in it are the chances of invasion been occurring. So the entire grassland is actually vulnerable to invasion if we do not have any active management intervention. So that is quite alarming when we have this map in our hand. So that was really alarming, and we wanted to really go and see what are the best control methods to get rid of this species. And this invasive species not only affects the native vegetation, but it also affects the grassland obligate species. It is a part of a separate study, although it comes from my doctoral research work, where we have found out that invasive plants actually negatively impact the habitat use of hog deer. So that's again alarming, as we have many rare species of grassland fauna which are known to occur only in Manas but not anywhere else, like the pygmy hawk. So given this, we initiated a long-term study. We initiated an experiment to understand what are the best methods to control this invasive. And the next one, please. Yeah, the next clip, please. So we conducted experiment. You can have all this together, Arjun. I think I'll explain it. Yeah, thank you. So as you can see from the map, the inside, yeah, rectangular box, that was the area where we conducted our experiments. We actually established 3 1-hectare experimental plots in the areas which had more than 90% of invasion and not less than 10% of native vegetation. And the treatments that we mostly applied were manually uprooting these invasive plants, cutting the invasive plants from above the ground level, and cutting and burning of these invasive plants. Sorry. Should I continue? Am I still audible?
Yes, please continue. Somebody has this muted.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, so we established this plot, and for the next 3 years we collected data on vegetation to understand what is the recovery of the native grass species, what is happening with the invasive plants when we are applying this treatment. From 2014 to 2016 we continued with these experiments, collecting data and analyzing those. And at the end of 3rd year, we found that manually uprooting the species, mostly the Chromolaena odorata, was an ecologically effective way to actually control the species. In these 2 graphs that you see, I'll just kind of briefly explain what are these. So those 4 columns you see, the first one is the control, the second one is the cut, the third one is the burned, and the 4th one is a cut and burned treatment. And all those different colors of yellow, green, and purple, those indicates different years. The purple is the 1st year, and the yellow is the 3rd year. So we have actually seen that by the end of the 3rd year, the grass density has increased in the treatment of manually uprooted species. You see that yellow bar, right, at the top of the graph. And also at the same time, the density of Chromolaena plant has decreased in the next graph. So we conducted these experiments, we analyzed the data and found out that manually uprooting the species would be the best possible way to control the spread of invasion, and as well as help in recovery of native grass community. The next one, please. Yeah. Okay. So coming to the sub-Himalayan grasslands, the sub-Himalayan grasslands are also one of the least studied ecosystems. We did not have much information on it, and particularly on the invasion. So our study kind of bridged the gap to bridge the gap of understand the invasibility of the ecosystem and what are the best way to actually control the species. Invasive species. And as I already told, that manually uprooting is an ecologically effective way. And I say so, why ecologically effective? Because once we remove the invasive plants, the grass community, it came of its own. The grassland become resilient enough, to help grow its native species, and give less space to invasion. And at the same time, we involved local communities from the fringe areas to uproot the species. That kind of also help supplement the livelihood of these fringe communities and made them aware on the habitat restoration, why habitat is important. So here in the right hand side panel, you can see that those are the people who are actually involved in were engaged in uprooting the species. And also there are a few takeaways from this study, that we must do the uprooting before the flowering happens. Chromolaena is a very wind dispersed species. So once we have the flowering, it gives a lot more opportunity for the spread of the species. So the flowering happens between October, November, and December. So we do this uprooting exercise just before the flowering season to minimize the spread. And also conducting the experiments, we found that we do have a lot of livestock grazing pressure in the southern boundary. So it's very it will be useful to have those areas which we're trying to revive fenced. And in this case, in our case, we used the non-lethal solar powered fences to protect it from livestock grazing. Yeah, next one, please. And with this effort, we have so far revived around 2 square kilometers of prime grassland habitat. Again, we prioritized the patch of habitat where we conducted our experiments, and we provided all these treatments depending on the what are the different animals that use these grassland areas. The next one, please. Yeah, so this I think you will go one by one, Arjun. So here is a photo story of the impact that we have. So this is the first picture you see. This is quite in the southern boundary. The entire 1 hectare plot. This was one of our experimental plots. So the entire 1 hectare plot is covered by the Chromolaena plants. All those green shrubs you see are the Chromolaena with less than 10% of native vegetation. The next one, please. So once we identified the area, and this was also the area which was once, in the 80s, from the secondary information that we collected from the researchers working there, then the 80s, in the early 80s, these are the areas which was used by species like the Bengal foraker and the pygmy hawk, and now it's completely degraded. So we chose that area. We collected our experiments, took out the vegetation, collected information on the vegetation. The next one, please. Yeah, we engaged local communities there to uproot the species. We conducted these experiments for the next 3 years. And at the end of the 3rd year, you see the picture in the left-hand side below, right? This is the same area, just the same area after 3 years of removing the invasive plants. So the patch which was invaded by almost 90% has now been revived, and we have native grass species. Here there's a mixed species of Imperata sacrum and Naranga. So this is one of the experimental plots. After 3 years, we could actually show some. Given the success of this experiment, we scaled up our work, and we identified other prime locations where we could actually conduct the revival work. The next one, please. Yeah, so there's another patch of grassland, which is again, invaded by Chromolaena odorata in the eastern part of the park. The next one. Yeah, so the same patch after removal of those Chromolaena plants, this is a drone shot taken, and you can see that the entire it's a rectangular, like in a rectangular area. It was fenced by the solar powered fences, and all those and green dots, those are the native Adianthus species. So after the removal of the invasive, we could see that the area is very sparsely, occupied by this native grass species. The next one, please. Yeah, so we thought, since it's a very very sparsely the grass species are very sparsely distributed, we actually planted some of the native grass species taking clumps from the nearby areas. And yeah, thank you. No, it's good. So we engage local communities to actually plant the native species. And this is a photo of this monsoon. I think it was taken in 2022 August or September, and you can see the entire plot of grassland is occupied by Arianthus grass species. It's all in flowering, so we could actually revive that piece of grassland as well. So we kind of scaled up our work one by one. It's a long process, and it requires long-term commitment. So from the experiment to actually reviving the species, actually reviving actual grassland of 2 square kilometer, it took time. We have been working in this landscape since 2013. It's almost 10 years when we began our study. And when the grass was completely revived, we could see that there are grassland dependent species that were not using that area, like the hog deer, the Bengal furrican, are now actually using that area. The next one, please. Yeah, so we had quite a positive impact. I feel we have already revived 2 square kilometer of grassland habitat, and we're continuing with that work. And the success, the success with the experiment, and the success with actually reviving the grassland and making the grassland resilient enough to come of its own, we have renewed the interest in habitat conservation. When we could show our results and shared our results with the Manas authority, they were kind of very keen into taking this up. There were already some management interventions happening, like the regular grassland burning and all, but managing the invasion was not something that was looked into, and could actually renew the interest into habitat conservation, habitat reviving. And at one point of time, we felt that this must be institutionalized to take this further. So we had a series of workshops. We had a series of internal workshops, what we call, with the Manas authority and all the conservation organizations that are working in the area. And we had 3 or 4 such small scale habitat management workshops. And in 2022 we had more of a national level habitat management workshop in Manas, where we shared our results. We shared like what is the best practice to actually revive this grass from invasive plants. And also we felt that it must communicate it to a wider audiences. So we published our papers, 2 papers we published in a peer-reviewed journal. And we could see that in the results, and the success results showcased actually helped fund flow from the government to the forest department. And now they continuing the work. Yeah. The next one, please. With all the positive impacts, with all the good news, also comes the challenges. One of the prime challenges that we are facing, that we have faced, is the requirement of long-term commitment and investment in terms of money, investment in terms of effort. So any restoration work, as you all might know, requires a long-term planning and also a long-term commitment. And in this case, it's a very productive ecosystem. So any gap period actually results into negating the effect of habitat revival. So you have to have a continuous presence in terms of your efforts. Also any kind of unplanned developmental activities, like the anti-poaching camps or roads, also have also increases the chances of invasion. Some lesson learned where protection from livestock grazing is crucial for helping to revive these grasslands in a faster way. The next one, please. Yeah. Okay, so with this, it's in a nutshell of what RNEC and what our team is actually doing. We also have kind of video documented our work, and there is a link to the YouTube of RNEC channel where people interested can have a look of the kind of work that we are doing. These are the two papers that we published. The first one talks about how different factors actually impact the invasive species, and the second one talks about what are the best practices to control invasion and help reviving of these grasslands. The next one, please. Okay, yeah. So with this, I come to the end of my presentation, and I thank you. Thank my colleagues in the forest department, frontline staff, my field assistants, my funding agencies, everyone. Thank you. And thank all of you for patiently listening to the presentation. Arjun?
Yeah, thanks, Alalika, for this. Should I leave the slides on, or should I can get, I think that a lot of some, there are some.
I think you can, you can stop the presenting. I can open my own, presentation if that works. I'm good anyway.
Okay, I'll just leave it on for now. I mean, if you want to refer, then I can quickly go back and refer to those slides.
Sure.
There's a couple of questions that we see on the chat, and maybe since we have time, is it okay? I can just ask the speakers themselves to unmute and ask the question. I'll start with the first one is from Divya and Sridhar. So from Divya, Divya, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Alalika. Thank you.
It's
really nice to hear more about your work. Have always been fascinated by what you're doing there. A quick question. Are you following up on whether there is continued invasion of these grasslands where you've uprooted Chromolaena, or has it completely died out? So what would be the long-term, prognosis for your landscape?
Right. So the experiment we conducted for 3 years, we could see like if we can control other factors like the neighboring impact, then the grassland becomes resilient enough to stop invasion. But again, 3 to 5 years, depending on what is the percentage of the invasion species in its neighborhood, 3 to 5 years is a good time to revive these grasslands. But yes, we have been monitoring our grassland sites for almost 8 years now, and every now and then whenever we see that there are stresses of invasive plants coming along, we kind of uproot it. 5 years is a good time, depending again on the amount of, there are a lot of factors actually, like the amount of invasion, what is the percentage of invasive plants, what are the invasive, are there any invasive plants the surrounding which will potentially impact your restoration area. So there are those, if we can control those factors, I think 3 to 5 years time is a good time for a revival.
Thank you so much. Can I quickly ask a follow-up question, Arjun? Is there time?
Yeah, there's a lot of time. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So, Alalika, I just wanted to know, we've always learned that grasslands are largely managed by fire regimes, fire regimes. And also in the Terai area, it's the flooding of the grasslands, right? Seasonal flooding. So in the scenario of climate change, how do you see this, working out?
Right here, in case of Manas National Park, we don't have natural floods. Manas is not in the floodplains per se. It's in the foothills. So the grasslands. If we can quickly go back to the map, Arjun. Yeah. So the grasslands in Manas mostly occurs. It's kind of. I'll show you the map quickly. Yeah, this will do. This will do. Yeah. Okay. So if you see the distribution of the grasslands, it's mostly in the southern part of the park. Beyond this boundary, we have villages villages and agricultural lands, and up in the north we have the Bhutan hills. So the grasslands are kind of sandwiched between these two kind of human use area and the forested land, and we don't have natural floods. So actively managing these grasslands, either through controlled fire and managing the invasive, is only the way out to keep these grasslands as grasslands. And again, these grasslands in Manas are not, the climax stage of grassland. It's in the process of natural succession. There's another management intervention that we are trying out of, actually discouraging the growth of woody plant encroachment like the Bombyx savia. I have not put up this here. It's still in the experimental stage where we are trying out how we can, control the woody plant encroachment here. So in the face of climate change, of course, yes, I think these grasslands will be greatly affected, as this is very anthropogenic dependent, anthropogenic factor dependent grasslands here in Manas.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So thanks, Alolika. The next question, Anshita, would you unmute yourself and ask the question directly?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Just wanted to know how difficult is it? From where I am speaking, there are these invasive plants that are very difficult to uproot because the roots are really deep. So just wanted to know, are they difficult to uproot?
Well, they are not as difficult as lantana, that's for sure. Like if it gives you an idea, in an area of 1 hectare with almost 90% invasion, it takes almost 20 daily wages for 10 days to work for an 8-hour period to get the invasive plants completely removed. It's a lot of physical, masculine power that needs to go, but it's not as difficult as lantana. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Madhura, please, you can unmute yourself and ask directly. Thank you.
Hi, Alolika. Nice work. I wanted to ask you about, you said you uprooted before the flowering season so that you would not help the establishment again. But when did you measure, like, all the details, all the statistics that you have, which you show on your box plots and everything? When did you actually measure what is the impact of the, your experiments, whatever experiments you had done, your control and experimental?
Right.
Which month of the year?
Yeah. So during our experimental stage, all our data collection and uprooting happened pre-flowering, which was just after the monsoon in August, September. It's a very small window that we get because from June to August we have too much of rains. Our field work is impacted, and so during the experimental period we mostly have our entire data set from the pre-flowering season. In certain areas, sometimes we were kind of delayed in uprooting the species, and I think you can also see in the photos, and in some cases we also have uprooting during the flowering season. But the best will be to do the uprooting in the non-flowering seasons, and all our data set comes from the non-flowering season. Yeah.
So your measurements are also in that season. You're counting everything. Your uprooting also happens then, and your actual measurements on the ground in the control and experiment plots also happens in that season.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Measurements in terms of vegetation, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
Yes. Yeah. It happens pre-flowering. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also had another question, but you already answered it in answering somebody else's question, so that's fine.
Sure, I'll make a note of that as well. Peter, do you want to unmute and ask?
Hi, Alolika. Very nice to hear about your work and see its progress here. Thank you so much for that presentation. A couple of questions from here. One is that your work shows that uprooting Chromolaena is more effective, but fire perhaps also plays an role in maintaining grasslands. So I was curious to know why you did not have an uproot and burn treatment, and if you did, would that work better? So that was one question. The other question is from a colleague here, Srini. He was asking, he wants to know whether you have this aquatic sort of invasive Ludwigia peruviana found there, and is that a problem in your landscape?
Right. I'll answer the first question here first. So while uprooting the Chromolaena, we did have a uprooting and burn technique. So we uprooted the Chromolaena, we kept it for drying in the area where we uprooted initially, and then then we burnt it off. But in the latter part of as the work progressed, we found that we might kind of help disperse the seed if we keep the Chromolaena in the same place. So we uproot the Chromolaena, and then we bring that plants out of the park and do the burning. Yes. And also we are trying to, I have not put it up in the slide here. Also, we are trying to diversify the use of Chromolaena. By saying that we are not, kind of propagating the use of Chromolaena, because Chromolaena is also common in the agricultural lands in Manas. So what we're doing is we actually helping the women self-help groups around the national park to extract dye. Chromolaena gives a very good khaki color natural dye. So we are helping those women to extract this natural dye and use that dye in dyeing the threads and weaving. So we kind of dispose this Chromolaena plants and burned it off.
Yeah, thanks for that. But if you burnt the Chromolaena outside, that's fine. But what if after removing the Chromolaena biomass and taking it out, if you burnt the grassland, would that also stimulate grass diversity or grassland plants a bit more? Is something like that considered by you?
Right. So also it depends on the season, right? The grass burning mostly happens here in January and February in the dry season, and most of the Chromolaena that we uproot happens in the wet season. So burning then it might not be possible, but we can surely try out with the experiments.
Yeah, thanks for that. And the other question was about Ludwigia.
No, we don't have, it has not been reported yet. I won't say we don't have it. You never know what you have in the park. But yeah, during our service, we haven't reported it.
Great. Thank you so much.
May I ask my question if that's okay?
Yes, I was going to just say that. So that's great. Please do.
Okay. Hi, Alolika Di. I hope you're doing fine.
Hi.
So my question is, the thing is, first of all, we know that the invasion by this alien species has been a menace to the grassland covers for a very long time. And so is manually uprooting it the sole feasible solution? And also with the upcoming climatic changes being predicted to have severe impacts, how vulnerable are these grassland covers going to become in front of the alien species invasion?
So manually uprooting the invasive plants is not very cost effective that way. But when you are in a protected area, there are certain restriction of using of chemical what do you say? What do you call that? The use of the chemical in getting rid of these invasive plants. In this conservation model, it's also involving engaging the local communities as well. Here we are not only kind of helping reviving the grassland, but also supporting the local communities supplement their livelihood and ensure their well-being. So it's a model that involves community habitat restoration and the management authority. It might not be successful in a large scale. It might not be successful for doing 100 kilometers of restoration in grassland, but it works in a smaller scale, in a patchy way. Yeah, it does. And what was the next part of the question? It's Panchali, right?
Yeah, that's me. The next part was like, with the upcoming climatic change happening in the environment, how vulnerable will these grassland covers become in the future in front of this invasion?
See, these grasslands are, anyways, very anthropogenic dependent grasslands. If you, as I told, the grasslands in Manas are not the climax old growth grasslands. They are in the process of natural succession. 20 years, if you do not do any management intervention, there is likelihood that the entire grasslands will be converted to woodland. So there's always a need of anthropogenic factors to maintain these grasslands.
Okay, Deep. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mayuresh, do you want to go next with your question?
Sure. Sorry. Hi, Lolika. Nice presentation. I just wanted to ask, do invasives get grazed by livestock or browsed, whatever, grazed, browsed? And
I have seen elephants eating the Chromolaena. Livestock, yeah, that's but other smaller species like the hog deer or swamp deer, no, they do not, they are mostly grazers though, so they do not forage on this species. In terms of livestock, I think they mostly go for the grasses there. It's not that I have observed most livestock, foraging on these invasive plants, but elephants, wild elephants, I have seen wild elephants foraging on the invasive plants, and also rhinos.
okay, thank you so much. Yeah.
But I won't be able to tell you, the percentage of
Sure,
the
sure.
percentage of forage amount that this can contribute. But it's a larger herbivores like the elephant and the rhinos I have observed in field eating those species.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think there's a follow-up to the sorry. I think there's a follow-up to that, which is did herbivores also adapt to eating this over time? Or I mean, I'm guessing they have, considering that you said.
Sorry, Arjun, I didn't.
No, I think you've kind of answered this also. The question was, did herbivores adapt to eating the invasive species over time? And the answer is that some mammals have, right? I guess.
I'm not sure whether they have adapted. It can be, opportunistic as well. Large herbivores, are not very selective that way, like the elephants and the rhinos. So I've seen them, but haven't quantified the contribution of this species into their diet. I would be interested to look into, like how it's affecting.
Okay, thank you. Next is Sanish. Sanish had two different questions. So Sanish, please, if you could unmute yourself.
Thank you, ERA and Alorika for doing this effort. I also appreciate that you have involved the communities in reviving. So I have three questions, but some of my questions are already answered in some of the other way. The first question was, is the system a fire adapted system? Like, is the grassland a fire adapted system? Like traditionally, is there a fire regime that you have documented?
It's a fire dependent ecosystem. I read your question. So you mentioned about the woodland has encroached. Yes, it did. So the grasslands are not the climax vegetation. It's in the succession process. So a lot of grasslands were converted to woodlands, and this happened so because in the 15 years of the armed conflict, not much maintaining and management interventions were carried out. So that actually kind of fast the process, and that has also become a problem for the grassland dependent species. We have very rare species like the pygmy hawk, the Bengal florican, and like hispid here. So this species, if we lose this grassland, we lose all these species at one go. So in a different on a separate experiment that we're conducting right now, is looking into how we can control this woody plant encroachment, mostly by species like the Bombyxiba and Butea monosperma. I can see one of my colleagues here in the audience today, who is actually Kaushik, who is actually working on these factors on this, how to come up with pragmatic measures to control the woody plant encroachment.
Okay. So my other question was like, okay, when comparing to the invasive species, so how do you compare the change of native grasses and to other invasive species?
Right.
We actually. Sorry.
No, please continue. Yeah, please continue.
No, I just want to understand who is winning, who is losing? Are the invasives really losing the battle against the against you and the native species, or are they still surviving?
On a broader scale, we are losing. On a site-specific restoration treatment, I think the invasive are losing. Okay, so when we had our experimental plots, we had an active treatment going on for the for quite a significant number of years. In those areas where we are actively involving people to get rid of these invasives, we can see there is a decline in the percentage cover or the density of invasive places, and there's a species, and there's an increase in the grass species diversity, grass species cover, and grass species density, but only in the areas where there are intervention been taking place. But beyond those areas, in the neighboring areas, not much positive news are coming from. It's an invasive species. But one good thing about Manas, revival of grassland Manas is, so far we have around 30%. If we have an active engagement for the next 10 years with a very well adapted strategies, I think we will be able to control the spread of invasion. Yeah.
Can I ask a short question? So to a larger landscape level, I mean, if you want to expand it to a larger area, so the cost will be much higher, right? Because
yes.
Considering yeah, thanks, and all the best, Alalika, and I really enjoyed your talk. Yeah.
Thank you.
So in the interest of, thanks, Alalika. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask the questions directly because it'll just go faster. So Ankita was asking about what was the method of planting grass clumps, and was it planted randomly or was it in some particular framework or measurement?
Right. So we planted the grass clumps where we felt that the native grasses are occurring very sparsely. You can skip to one of those photos, Arjun, in the meantime. And we kind of did a survey that what are the species actually present in that area, and we replicated those species only.
Any of these?
Yes, so this is one of the areas where you can see that the native grass species, these are mostly arianthus grasses that are occurring very sparsely. So we actually, and in the next photo you can see a boy planting a grass. We actually cut out a clump from the nearby. No, the other one. Please back click this. Yeah. So we actually cut out a clump from the native, bigger clump and planted those. That was again, done in a very experimental way. This was done just before, during the monsoon, not before the monsoon, and it survived the dry season as well. So now we believe that it's going to survive. So we kind of replicated the native grass species that is present in that area and planted those grasses only. All these grasses, if you know, all the grasses occurs in a particular assemblages. It's not random. We studied like what are the species there and kind of replicated those species in plantation. That was the question, right?
Yeah.
Sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to ask actually that, what was the distance between the plantation of the two grasses? Like
two grass clumps.
Yeah.
We have, that will be difficult to answer in terms of quantity, but it will be at least 5 meters. Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think somebody I think there was another question in relation to that from Arpita, and she was like, she was asking, were only grasses chosen or even herbs were chosen for restoration sites?
Okay, so we chose grass. What we felt that when I mentioned that uprooting is an ecologically effective way, so all this grass community come with their own set of a vegetation community. If we are talking about Imperata saccharum dominated grassland, then there comes the herbs called Premna herbaceae and Grua sepida. So we mostly targeted grasslands, but once we have a healthy grasslands, all these herbs and the native shrubs that are associated with that particular grassland community came up of their own.
Thank you. Arpita, Ankita, does that answer your questions, or do you have any follow-ups on this before I go on to the next question?
Yes, it was answered. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. The next question is from Shagun, and her question is, how did you involve the community and what level of involvement did they have? Shagun, if there are other clarifications you want to add, please jump in. But yeah, that was her question.
So just before answering to this question directly, I would like to mention about the community model, community conservation model in Manas. So as I mentioned that Manas had long history of armed conflict, then everything was regained, peace was regained, and all these conservation efforts slowly started in. What actually helped was there some hundreds of volunteers. Now they are volunteers. Those were poachers. They actually surrendered before the management, and now they are kind of helping the management in patrolling the areas, in all the other conservation activities. So Manas has been a very conservation, community conservation model. The forest department, the conservation organization, and the community they they have been working in tandem for the last 20 years to revive the entire ecosystem of Manas, to get back the glory that Manas once was. So yes, so that was the broader concept of community conservation in Manas. For this project, here we have our local our project assistants and field assistants are from local communities, and on top of that we hire these local youths from the fringe villages to do all this kind of uprooting the species, and that provides them daily wages. And also it's not only kind of giving employment, but we take an effort to explain to them like what they are actually doing by removing those invasive plants, by planting these grasses. It helps them, it will help the ecosystem to revive, which will eventually help the availability of potable water in the fringe villages. So we do informal outreach as well to garner that conservation support that they have already been providing. And what level of openness does the government have? So as I mentioned, that once we could successfully demonstrate that by managing the invasive plants, we could revive the grassland habitat. An informal consortium was formed with all the conservation organizations that work in the arc, and we were entrusted of developing a document on grassland management, which has been shared with the government. So we are very transparent with the government and all the communities that we work with, and that has actually helped in the successful implementation of the project. Yes.
Thank you for that, Alovika. So there are follow-up questions to the community. So Atul asks, what are the major problems you faced when working with the community? And but first I want to check in with you if you have time. We have already reached 5 o'clock. And I think there are around 4 or 5 questions that people have. So just checking in on that first before we go.
I think I will be good to take this. Yeah.
Okay, great. So Atul's questions, what are the major problems faced working with the community? So it's just continuing on the same lines that we talked about.
Right. Yeah, as I mentioned that the communities around Manas are already very well aware of the conservation efforts that need to be put in for Manas to regain its glory. And luckily for the organization that I work in, we have been working in this landscape for the last 20 years. We have a very good rapport with the communities there. So it was not much of a problem convincing them and make them a part of the work. It came quite easy. It resulted from from all these years of rapport building and involving them and being transparent with them. Yes.
Thank you. So Shagun had another question, and I think what we talked about, there's a lot of involvement from the government and the forest department from Manas and the communities around that. Are you also collaborating with other organizations with respect to these restoration practices or things like that? So
yes, we have few organizations who are actively working in the Manas landscape, like WWF India, Wildlife Trust of India. A3 was also there at one point of time. So we I mentioned about the informal consortium that we had. So we had representatives from all these organizations, which kind of helped prepare the document for the grassland management. Yes, we do have a good relation with all the organizations that we work in. Many of our projects are collaborative between Ecosystem India, WWF India, WTI, and also the grassroots level organizations that we have in Manas.
Nice to hear that. Thank you. So there are two questions that are there from Swapnil. One is, what are the chances that invasives would come back after the grazing is resumed, preferably by the wild herbivore? But that's his first question. I'll let you answer that and then I'll ask the other question.
Yes. So the first question is, what are the chances of invasing being back, right? After?
Yeah, after grazing is resumed in those areas of the plots
Okay.
that you
While
already
grazing by livestock or grazing by wild animals? Can I see the question? Where is the question? Who was? Okay. So after we provide the treatment of manually operating for 5 years or 3 to 5 years, the grassland become resilient enough, I mentioned, right? If we can protect it from livestock grazing, there are less chances of invading, being reoccurring in the area. Wildlife grazing is not a problem. But having said that, it also depends on what are if there are not many, invasive plants in the neighboring areas. So we have this, particular, suppose 3 hectare plot, we have fenced it. But what we also do is within a strip of around 20 meter around that rectangular revival plot, we also clear off the Chromolaena plants to minimize the neighboring impact. So in that scenario, there are less likelihood of invasive reoccurring in that place. Less likelihood means in a less density. But in areas where you have, many disturbances, like a lot of vehicular movement, a lot of also we have this domestic elephants in the camp, so where a lot of tethering happens when you tie the elephant in a longer in one particular place for a longer period of time, then those kind of factors kind of help re-establish the invasive plant population.
Thank you for that. And the other question that Swapnil had, Swapnil, first, I would like to check if that answers your question or if there's any follow-up on that before I move on to your, and maybe you can ask your second question directly then.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, like the first question in terms of was addressed to the wild herbivore. In case of the grazing and the grasslands have improved, their nutritious value has improved, that will be again the preferable choice for the wild herbivore to go and eat, right? So that was the first question, and partially kind of answer, but in our experience in another part in Koshitapu, the species tend to come back after 3-4 years, if the right attention has not been given. But I think it is a matter of time and how intensity is there of all the factors.
Time, and also feel the matter of what are the other factors you need to control. It's not only controlling the invasive in the particular restoration side, but also controlling other factors like minimizing the vehicular movement or something like this. A lot of factors that actually play a role in propagating this species. Yeah.
Right. And just the follow-up question that I had, not a follow-up but slightly different. In terms of reaching to the scale, right? I presume that this one was funded through the department's initiatives and other things. But when we have to do this thing consistently for 10 years, I was wondering if we could use machineries such as excavators that are used in other agriculture fields, which are compared to the labor cost, excavators seem to do a little bit better job in terms of reducing the cost. So I was just wondering if you have ever thought about using the machines.
In studies elsewhere in the northern Tarai, it has been proved that when you harrow the land, it kinds of helps the invasive come up faster because it shuffles, that it brings it shuffles the tops, and the seeds of Chromolaena, the seeds can remain in the ground for 5 to 6 years. So when we have this mechanical tractor or any excavator that actually kinds of help this invasive spread. So that's why we have tried all these experiments and narrowed it down to manual uprooting. But yes, I agree with this. It's difficult to scale up in a broader area. But harrowing is not, suggested for reviving the grassland because it kinds of facilitates the growth of invasive plants as well.
Okay. Thank you so much, Arulika. I think that answers Swapna's questions. And there are a few more questions. I think, have you seen? So Nena asks, I wanted to ask that when the grasslands were restored, did you notice new species coming to live in that region. Have you seen examples of this already?
Okay. I won't say new species, but yes, the species that were not using that particular area. So when we actually, before doing the treatment, we had our, we collected information on what are the animal species that are using the area or not. So from that information, we could see that after the grassland has revived, the hog deer and Bengal florican reusing the area. So yes, there are certain the restored areas were used by fauna species, and in terms of the vegetation, the native not any new species, but the native assemblage came up of its own. So does it answer your question, Nana? Right?
Yeah. Okay, and yes, it does. Okay, so the another question from Shagun. We can take that a little. So I think Harsha Vardhani asked, can you please tell us about the 4 different treatments undertaken and also how often the invasive was uprooted? Right? So I think I'll go back to your graph, I'm guessing, right?
Okay, yeah. So the 4 treatments where the first one was manually uprooted. So you can see in the first paragraph. So there was a manual uprooted, cutting of the invasive plants from above the ground level, and cutting and burning. And the 4th was the control, like where we did nothing with the invasive at all. So we tested these 4 different treatments. And the second part of question was how often was the invasive uprooted? It was uprooted once in a year, just before the flowering season.
Okay. Thank you. And the last question that we have from Shagun is, how do you identify an invasive species? Is it only after it has spread? And yeah, so that was the last question. I think the other one that she has already been answered.
Yeah. So there is a list of plants and animals that are considered invasive in your country. The species that is considered invasive and alien for your ecosystem might not hold true for other ecosystem as well. So in our case, we already kind of have a idea of what the invasive species could have been in the area from the previous reports and observations of the researchers. Yes. And there's a list, there are lists of species that could be invasive to your ecosystems. You already have that information out there.
Thank you so much, Arulika. Just checking in case I've missed out anyone's questions or there are any last questions that people want to ask, you can unmute yourself and ask. Otherwise, we can try and close the session. So just opening it out once for a minute or two if anyone has anything. I'm taking the silence as a no. Okay, so thank you so much, Arulika, for sharing your about your project with us and sharing having the and being patient with all these questions and all these things that everyone had from the audience and sharing everything that your learnings. We hope to, we'll make this talk public. So in case, we'll put it up on the ERA website in case there are any questions or you want to revisit it, you're welcome to, people will be able to revisit that. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone who stuck around with us and those who were there with us till the time they could in this talk. So thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And it was a nice interaction. I completely enjoyed, speaking about the work and interacting with you all. And please feel free. Can you go back to the first slide, Arjun? There is my email ID. So yeah, if someone, they might have some question at one point of time, you can always write back to me and try my best to, yeah.